Mara had a way of smiling that made people assume she had never lost anything important. In truth, she had lost almost everything that once made her life feel steady. First came the job she had trusted, then the apartment she could no longer afford, and finally the relationship she had thought would last through any storm. Each loss arrived in a different season, but together they formed one long winter. She told herself she was being practical. She polished her resume, took temporary work, and made careful lists of overdue bills. Yet every night, after the noise of the city softened, she felt the same question rising in her chest. Why did this happen now, and what was left to believe in? Her grandmother, who had lived through wars, floods, and more grief than she ever spoke about, used to say that faith was not the absence of darkness, but the refusal to let darkness have the final word. Mara had heard the words many times and never fully understood them. Now she repeated them like a faint prayer while waiting for buses, standing in grocery lines, and staring at the ceiling of a borrowed room. One evening, after a failed interview and a missed payment notice, she walked without aim until she reached a small community center overlooking the river. Inside, a volunteer was organizing supplies for families affected by a recent storm. The room was crowded with boxed food, folded blankets, and people speaking in quiet, tired voices. The volunteer asked Mara if she could help sort donations. Mara almost refused. She felt too broken to be useful. But she stayed. At first, she only stacked cans and labeled boxes. Then she noticed a young father trying to entertain his daughter with a cracked phone and a patient smile. She saw an elderly man choosing bread with careful hands, as if humility itself had worn a face. She saw a mother thanking strangers for items that looked ordinary until they were no longer ordinary at all. As Mara worked beside them, something in her shifted. Her own losses did not disappear, but they no longer seemed like evidence that life had rejected her. They began to feel like the ground that had forced her to learn how to stand differently. The volunteer returning from the storage room paused and said, "You are calmer than when you arrived." Mara almost laughed. "I am not calm," she said. "I am just tired of fighting what I cannot change." The volunteer nodded as if that answer belonged to a larger truth. "Sometimes faith begins there," he said. "Not when you understand the road, but when you keep walking anyway." Weeks passed. Mara found work in the same community center, first as a helper, then as someone trusted with planning and outreach. The pay was modest, but the purpose was real. She learned to budget with discipline, to ask for help without shame, and to recognize that dignity was not measured by the size of her savings. She also learned that people who had suffered often carried a sharper form of compassion. Her scars did not make her weaker. They made her attentive. One morning, while unpacking donations, Mara found a notebook tucked inside an old box of books. On the first page, someone had written, "The worst moments are not the end of your story. They are the place where your future learns its first strength." Mara sat down and read the line again. It felt less like a slogan than a mirror. Her life had not been rescued by luck. It had been reshaped by loss, patience, and the stubborn decision to trust that hidden meaning still existed. Years later, when people asked how she had rebuilt her life, Mara never spoke about a sudden miracle. She spoke about ordinary days, difficult tears, and the strange mercy of being broken open before becoming whole. And when she spoke of faith, she did not describe it as certainty. She described it as the quiet belief that even the worst moments can become the foundation of a wiser, kinder, and stronger future.